What up, what up? I'm back at it with another video. For today's video, I will be doing my 2020 YouTube Wrapped. So Spotify comes out with this thing at the end of each year called Spotify Wrapped. It is an interactive program created by Jewel Ham. She was a former intern and they pretty much, took her idea and now it's become a part of the brand. So at the end of each year, it shows you all of the songs that you've listened to the most, all of the artists that you've listened to the most. And I thought I would do my own version of that with 5 albums that got me through 2020. So before I get into my list, I'm just thinking about this year and how so much has happened, and was I always in a place to receive new music? And the answer, frankly, is no. Like, there were so many portions of the year where I just was like completely closed off, and so I was very much like, oh, music sucks this year, and that's just not true. Like, there has been so much amazing music that has come out this year, but for so much of the year, I and a lot of other people haven't been in the right headspace to receive music. So I just kind of wanted to say that because I think a lot of people could relate to that. So my number 5 is going to be Painted Deluxe by Lucky Daye. Painted Deluxe came out this year, and it basically came out to mark the 1 year since his debut, Painted, dropped. Painted Deluxe came out with a couple new tracks. Shoulda, produced by Babyface and featuring Babyface. Roll Some More, the reggae remix, featuring Chronixx and MediSun. Ready to Love, the extended version. Buying Time, Little More Time, Fade Away, and Misunderstood, live in New Orleans. I love this album. It is a contemporary R&B album, though it has a very strong jazz heartbeat to it. It is very clear that Lucky Daye loves jazz, and it has like a funk and swing element to it. It also just sonically, you can kind of feel that like it was either made by somebody from New Orleans, or there's something about it and I can't quite put my finger on it, but I hear it and I'm like, oh, like is this person from New Orleans? And Lucky Daye is from New Orleans, I really like that aspect to it, and I thought that made it really, really unique. And it just feels good to listen to this album. You feel it. It feels good to listen to it. You want to be in love. You want to dance. It has like this nice like flow, and he has a couple verses where he's rapping on it in different songs, and he has a flow, so that just kind of comes out in various ways. I would say my favorite tracks on this are A Little More Time, Buying Time, and Real Games. And I would say a risk that he took on this was doing the Roll Some More remix, the reggae remix, because I wouldn't automatically just listen to his music and think, oh yeah, reggae, or like you could do a remix, a reggae remix. And surprisingly, it really, really worked. The remix with Chronixx and MediSun. So I thought that was a great risk that he took that paid off. Some producers that he worked with were D-Mile. D-Mile had a huge impact on the sound of this album, and DJ Camper, and other producers. The writers were Babyface, Victoria Monet, Lucky Daye, Ginuwine, Static Major, etc. And there were 19 tracks on this record. Number 4 is going to be How Do You Feel About Getting Married by Dijon. Now, I love Dijon so much. This is his second official studio project, and this album is classified as like alternative R&B, and it is so romantic and tender and also thrilling, which was really refreshing and needed. And it's like the definition of be his piece. I feel like there's also something about this EP. It's an EP, not an album. There's something very hazy about this EP. It feels like you're going in and out of focus, but in music form. He mixes rock and roll, funk, folk, some blues, some bluegrass into this like alternative R&B sort of sound. And there's some pop influences as well. Something that really stands out about Dijon's music, and specifically this record, is that it has like a very like minimalist approach to production, and that goes from everything from like having this very like sort of stripped down sound and layering to also like his vocals. And he has a beautiful voice, but there's also this rock and roll sort of like approach that is very sort of the opposite of super duper perfect. Feels very organic organic. So my favorites on this were Rock and Roll and Jesse, and a huge risk that Dijon took with this EP is, first of all, making songs about men and women. You know, it's 2020, whatever, but at the same time, people's entire careers are oftentimes ruined by them acknowledging the fact that they like men and women. And here we have a man who is singing to men and singing to women, and it is just really beautiful. I think another risk that he took is just really like his approach to music, you know, the minimalist production sound and production style. There are 6 tracks on this EP. Dijon produces a lot of the music, so does Henry Guapis and Jack Karaszewski. Dijon writes a lot of his music, he plays guitar on this record, and Dijon talked about some of his inspirations for this being Octavia Butler, Lucinda Williams, Alitalia Feet, and Burial, Norah Jones, and The Cars. Number 3 is going to be Lianne La Havas. So this is Lianne La Havas's 3rd studio project, and this is Selftitled. So it's been about 5 years since we heard from her last, and a lot of this album has to do with the life cycle of an entire relationship. Having broken up with someone that she was with for a very long time and moving back to London after living in LA for some time with her ex. I would classify this album as like a pop soul folk album. I feel like a lot of times with black artists, if there's any sort of like beat or singing, it's like a lot of people automatically classify it as like R&B, and that's a whole other conversation. But when I listen to this, I hear pop, I hear soul, I hear folk, and I hear rock and roll, and those are like the main elements that I hear. There's some blues, there's some jazz, and just returning back to what the album is really about, it's about these different life cycles and also about getting to know yourself outside of a relationship, getting to know yourself on your own personal growth. And that is like what a lot of this year has been about. It's been a lot of solitude and growing and getting to know myself in different ways. This album is complicated. At times it feels good, and then at other times it doesn't. At times it's painful. There's uncertainty, and yeah, like that's what personal growth is. It's not always like this beautiful picture. It's everything. It's dreamy, it's romantic, it's angsty. My favorites are Can't Fight, Courage, and Sour Flower. I think one of the risks that Lianne took is having the Weird Fishes cover, Radiohead's song, which has been covered so many different times. She did a cover as well, and she slowed it down, and it was a big risk, but she killed it. And it is an amazing song, and like she made it her own, and that's not easy to do. I think another risk was also taking so much time off of music. I think that it is important for artists to take steps away from their art, especially when it comes to music, because you want to experience things, or you want to learn, you want to grow. And at the same time, you don't know if you take a break for 5 years, if your audience will still be there for you when you come back 5 years later. You don't know if who you are as an artist now is someone that they would be receptive to. And sometimes taking that break can take you out of the flow of creating and releasing and creating and releasing, and you can get like very stuck in your head about like, I don't know. But I'm really glad that she took this break for her own personal development, and also as an artist, I feel like this record really is her getting to know who she is as a musician. And even though I feel like she kind of knew that fresh out the gate with her debut, Is Your Love Big Enough, at the same time, like she went through so much growth as a person and as a musician, and so I really appreciate what she presented on this record. There were 12 tracks on this record, though the first song and the last song are the same, Bittersweet, so it's really like 11 tracks. Lianne is a writer, she's a producer. Muramasa is a writer and a producer on this, which is so cool. Number 2, so it's gonna be The Ungodly Hour by Chloe and Halle. Now, I love this album so much. This is their 2nd album, and this is contemporary R&B. I think it is young, it is fun, it is sexy, it is futuristic. Listening to this album, I feel like we're in the future, having a party on the moon or having a party underwater in the first ever city. There are classical influences, jazz influences, doo-wop and funk influences and hip-hop influences. They are sirens, and that is what you get from this record. You get that they are underwater. You get that they are in the future. They're mermaids. I love them so much. I've been a fan for a very long time, since YouTube days, and so I'm over the moon about them. I love them so much. I am glad that they are having their moment, because prior to the release of this, I felt like they were still like sort of niche, and like I was always telling people like, nah, you need to get into Chloe and Halle, you need to get into the music. The music is everything, you know? And so I'm happy that they are having their moment in the sun, and I encourage people to go back, listen to their projects before this. Listening to this makes you want to get up and dance. They've got steel pans on here, like from the Caribbean. Some of my favorites are Lonely and the Ungodly Hour, so I recommend checking those out. And I would say a big risk that they took was the song Catch Up with Swali. And when it first dropped, I actually really didn't like it, but when I got the entire album and played it in order, I was like, this makes complete sense. It makes complete sense in rotation, and it actually really grew on me. I think another really big risk that they took with this album was with the name Ungodly Hour, and also like the fallen angel sort of aesthetic. That could have really put off their audience. A lot of people who either grew up with them, seeing them as these like goody two-shoe church girls or whatever, and using this sort of like dark imagery and stuff like that. But they talked about how they wanted to challenge this misconception that people had of them as these like goody two-shoe angels, and that they're like these little girls. They are young women, and they are incredibly innovative, and they are such a huge force. They make me excited for music. They make me excited for the future. The album is labeled as contemporary R&B, but personally I think that this is more of like a pop album. But once again, you know, like if people see a black person and they can sing and there's like a little bit of like a beat, it's like, oh yeah, this is R&B. This is not like, it's not really R&B to me. I mean, it says contemporary R&B. I would say that this is a pop album. Obviously, you know, some R&B influences, and also jazz influences, and also classical, and also blah blah blah, you know? But yeah, anyway. There are 13 tracks on this. Chloe and Halle are producers and writers, and Beyonce was also a producer on this. So was Disclosure, so was Mike Will Made It. And number 1 is going to be Gray by Moses Sumney. Now, this album, this is an alternative indie album with rock and roll, gospel, soul, blues, folk influences, and it is such a phenomenal mashup and so incredibly unique. That is something about Moses Sumney that is really distinctive. He's just so unique. Aspects of this project, or Moses Sumney in general, kind of reminds me of Marcus Tolliver from back in like MySpace days. This album really feels like a cosmic dream, a cosmic journey. It is whimsical and in the future, and I feel like it's building a world in the future. Solange talks about this a lot. She talks about building cities with music, and I definitely feel like Moses Sumney is in that same vein of like building worlds, building futures. Very Afrofuturist. There's feelings of isolation in this record, black liberation, queer self-esteem, and that's a big one, which is so central to this project, and which I love so much, because it's one thing to just be like, oh yeah, I'm queer, okay, cool, whatever, but like there has been so little work done on queer self-esteem, and that is something that I try to do on this channel. Make us feel good about ourselves and make us feel good about the fact that we are queer, and that's what aspects of this project are. There are themes of sifting through chaos and wrestling with discomfort, wrestling with the complexities of life and love and friendship and time travel. My favorites on this record are Viral, Polly, Me in 20 Years, and of course, Bless Me. So you should check those out. Some of the risks on this record, I would say him just being so unique in a world of conformity. This world is all about conforming, and you get praised and you get coverage when you conform. And Moses is like, nuh-uh, I am not interested in that. I'm interested in building. And there's also an interlude on the song Boxes that I want to read. And this was said by Aisha K. Faines. I truly believe that people who define define you, control you. And the most significant thing that any person can do, but especially black women and men, is to think about who gave them those definitions and rewrite those definitions for themselves. So some producers on this were Jill Scott and Moses Sumney. Some writers were Jill Scott, James Blake, Moses Sumney, Michaela Cole, and this had 20 tracks. So I want to thank you for listening to me ramble on about some of my musical faves from the year. If you made it this far, please leave me some hearts down in the comment section below. And if you would like to help, my Cash App and my Venmo is right down below as well. I'll see you next time. Peace.